All right, so let's see if we can put some of this together, baby steps. So I put the front faceplate, the front plate on. That's mounted, it's very sturdy. These tabs that we fixed ended up working out pretty well. So the next thing is putting in the servo, the steering up front here. That'll go in next. So we want to tighten this up a little bit. All right, so now we've got, these will go to the steering, so the servo, this is a servo saver, so there's a spring that's loaded in it, and basically keeps your servo from getting stripped or burnt. But nowadays the servos, you know, they have steel gears, and you can get a heavy-duty servo saver for the servo itself. So, so these are a bit dated, but they still do the job. So the next thing we'll do is put the battery brace in there. This will hold the battery down, the old school batteries. Now, I forgot we were going to use Allen wrenches now, Allen heads. They look nicer. Okay, so we got that in place. Now on the other side here, you don't want to tighten this down too tight, because you need to have the battery. Just want to straighten this out a little bit. There we go. Okay, so what have we got there? We'll have a 3mm screw that'll go onto that little section there. For now, we'll just, I'll usually place a washer there, but on the bottom here. But just for the time being, we'll just go ahead. All right. So we've got our steering, we've got our battery. Next thing we want is, we want to do the rear tranny. So for the rear tranny, what'll happen is, this will go like this. Two holes on the bottom here. So those two for now, and two nuts for those. One tightened. Let's tighten the other one now. All right. So the next thing is the transmission, which go there. So that's held by these roll bar posts here. So what we're going to do with that is we put one in at a time. Figures I'd do the hardest one first. Let's do the other side instead. All right, so we got that mounted, and I think there's one more screw that we need. That's for this middle piece right here that goes into the tranny as well. Since it's already lined up, or should be, this should be just easy to screw right in. All right, so there's the rear portion all put together. And let's pause right here and let me get the parts for the next piece that we're gonna make. Okay. All right, so we want to mount the top plate, but before doing so, I went ahead and mounted the front tranny, the front gear case, I should say. It's only 3 screws that hold it in place, and 2 of them are self-threading onto the case, onto the frame of it already. The chain is a bit tight. I might need to add one more link to it, but you can see that it works quite well. Wow. So the upper part of the chassis here, you have to be real careful. These are for the servos, this guy here. On this is the top, where it has that little notch in it is the front. And I guess you can call it the driver's side if you're in the US, but it goes like this. You got to be careful to make sure of that, because this chain needs to clear. If you put this in backwards, that chain won't be able to clear this. So important, keep that in mind. So first things first, what we're going to do is put the shock towers on. Nice thing is, since we're using the original, or the parts that were already used, the thread's already in place, so it's not a struggle to put these shock mounts on. You'll notice that there's a little bit of play in the hole, so you can move the shock tower just a little bit, front or back, for adjustments. All right, so that's the front. The rear towers are smaller than the front. Okay. All right, so now that we have the shock towers in place, we can mount this. So the chain, the top part of the chain goes over this. This chain's really tight, man. So once that's in place here, we just move this up a little bit. There we go. Okay, and all the holes should line up. So let's screw these things on. We're just going to leave them a little bit loose, not over tighten, and actually not tighten it at all, because this chassis, you can see, is a little bit off. You see there's a small little tiny gap here between the side and the plate, and over here it's a little more pronounced, so we're going to have to kind of squeeze the chassis in a little bit. Okay, see what I mean? The hole here is off, so we're going to have to squeeze the chassis in just a little bit to line it up. And I'm doing that by, I don't want to squish both sides in, this one's already done. So I'm holding the gear case and pushing that side in just a little bit till the holes line up. Again, I'm not tightening it all the way just yet. Gonna have to do the same for the rear side of this. You can see right here the hole's not exactly lined up. You just have to kind of push it in a little bit. But once you got the front and the back screws in, then the ones in the middle should fall in place. You're probably also wondering why I'm just not using a screwdriver with a Allen head piece on it. The reason I don't is the screwdriver that I have for it is pretty thick, and it would just clog up you know, the screen. I figured using the Allen wrenches gives me more air so you guys can see a little bit more of what the heck is going on. So wanted to throw that out there. I'm not completely archaic. Old school is good, but obviously modern technology helps make things a lot easier. Alright, so I'm just going to basically put the rest of these screws in. I won't bore you with that, and we'll come back. The only thing really left on the top part here is putting the servo plate in. And the servo plate, I'm not going to mount the servos on it, you know, but again, the servo plate, you have to make sure that you know that it goes this way. There's a notch for the transmission. Okay. And you want to also be careful because one side is wider, you know, than the other. So, all right. So, actually, my bad. All right, so let me put this together and we'll come back and we'll keep going. Okay, so now that I've got the top chassis and everything screwed on, we're gonna put in the chain guard. The chain guard is held together by two plastic pieces here. And this keeps the chain on track, actually. It's not so much a guard, it's just to keep it straight. So, this chain is really tight. So they're held by two self-tapping 2.6 screws. And by the way, all the screws along the sides on the chassis that we just put together on the top part are all 2.6 millimeters. So be careful, don't use 3 millimeter screws, they won't work and you'll end up ruining the tap. So, see if we can catch that hole. It's going to take a little bit of doing. Probably, maybe should have done this a little bit earlier in the process. But let me, there we go. Now I got you. Got it. There we go. All right. Once you get one in, the other one should fall into place as long as it's lined up. You don't want to over tighten because you don't want to strip. These are self-tapping screws, but you want to be real careful. You don't want to strip them, because if you strip them, you're kind of screwed. You're going to have to fill it up with like glue or epoxy or something and then retap them. So, all right. There we go. Perfect. All right. Next on the agenda is the front suspension. So let me get all those parts together and we'll be right back. All right, let's tackle the front suspension now. So I got new steering stops. These are the original ones, all bent out of shape and just seen better days. This thing was obviously raced and thrashed. So for the front, note that there's two pieces. This piece here goes to the inside, okay? And then the bottom is wider than the top. So that second piece is basically going to line up just like that. So the steering stop, that little ridge there goes to the inside as well. Okay? So you basically have something that looks like this. Now, how does all of this stay together? Well, your steering knuckle has two rod ends, and that's what is going to get, the steering stop is going to get tightened onto. So let's put this thing together. These screws here are not 3 millimeters, FYI. They're, I believe, 3.5. Okay, so there's one side, just like that. So you do the other side the same, it's just that it's in reverse, obviously. This ridge always to the inside. You can see I'm just loosening these just a tiny bit. Okay. All right. So now, putting these things together, this fits in like this. And this side fits in like that. All right, so let's battle the suspension, the front suspension next. This is kind of simple, it's a no-brainer. I opened up a new package of axles because the original ones were pretty bent up and everything. The package comes with these two lock washers that you have to put on each side, or on each one of the axles on one side. The other side, there's a little screw that screws in, and make sure that the Allen wrench is on the other side and you screw it in and tighten it as tight as you can. So now that those are put together, I'm going to do the bottom first, and there's a reason for that, and you're going to see. You have these little washers that you shouldn't forget to put in on the bottom side, because you can see the top and the bottom where the shafts go in don't align. So there's a washer that goes here on each side. So there's this one, and then on the other side there's the washer there, and then there's the bottom. And the reason I do the bottom first, and there's a washer that goes here, and then there's a lock nut that goes on top, is because you need to grab that shaft in order to tighten up this lock nut. So in order to do that, if you put the top one in, you're not going to be able to reach, you know, the shaft there at the bottom. So I'm going to get in there, hold that shaft, and then tighten this guy here. Okay. So now we can put the top one in. Like so. And because these are straight, they should just slide right in. Boom. How do you like them apples? And put the washer. The lock nut. And now you can hold this shaft from the top while you're screwing this in. I'll do it this way so you can at least see what I'm doing here. Okay, done. All right, so that's all there is to the front suspension, really. And then it's just a matter of hooking on the rod ends and then the shocks. So I'm going to clean up the shocks. So we'll get to the rod ends and the shocks next, and then that'll wrap up the front end, and then we'll start looking at the back end of this, and we're about 75% done. So hang in there.